When you're a kid, there's something kind of magical about getting picked for the team, right? You want to be on the team, you want to play, you want to contribute, you want to bond with the other people that are on that team. And everyone working together in that team is working for that common goal to be able to overcome. Well, it turns out that NSX has a team as well. And the team that we're going to be talking about is called a transport zone. And that team is going to define those folks who are going to work together, sharing the same distributed elements like logical switches and routers. So in this nugget, we're going to take a look at what the transport zone is, and why we need it. So to start talking about this idea of a transport zone, let's first just start with something simple. Let's say it backwards. A transport zone is a zone, a boundary, within which we will share a common transport. The original idea of a transport zone was actually to differentiate between transport protocols. We're using VXLAN. But there are other protocols out there like NVGRE. And so you could have different zones to indicate which layer of layer 2 over layer 3 encapsulation you were using. But for us, that's not particularly relevant because VMware has settled on one and only one protocol, VXLAN. So why do we care about transport zones then? Well, a transport zone is still necessary because we need to indicate which clusters, notice I'm not saying individual hosts, but which clusters, here's cluster A and cluster B, are participating in the same logical switches. How many logical switches do you see in this diagram? If you said 2, that's the right answer because a logical switch is defined by its VXLAN network identifier. So we have 5000, 5001. So what does it take to really share this logical switch, to fool the virtual machines into thinking that they are all adjacent to one another? And the answer is they need to share the common tables that support adjacency. And that's going to be the VTEP table, so we can find our encapsulation endpoints, the MAC address table to reference the virtual machine's MAC address, and the ARP table, which is going to define where the IP address to VTEP references are in place. So these three tables need to be held in common by all of the nodes in the clusters that are participating in a transport zone, so that they can share the logical switches that are found within them. Remember that every logical switch will actually maintain its own VTEP, MAC, and ARP tables. So since in this case we have two logical switches, we would expect to see two sets of those tables being held by all the hosts that are a part of the clusters that are a part of the transport zone. It's very common to simply define one global transport zone. We'll simply take all the clusters, put them in the global transport zone that we create, and then all the hosts and all the clusters will have access to all the logical switches. That is limited, though, to only being shared within a single vCenter, and it is now possible to support cross vCenter NSX. And to do that, we're going to create what are called universal transport zones. So you might be thinking, just in case I want to expand, why not just go ahead and create a universal transport zone and not worry about the global transport zones? So here's just a few caveats. There can only be one universal transport zone, and you will have to create universal logical switches that are specifically defined to replicate across the universal transport zone. You can create numerous global transport zones, and you'll use the standard logical switch creation process to define those. And a particular cluster can simultaneously belong to both a global and a universal transport zone at the same time. So global transport zones, easier, the default, very flexible, limited to one vCenter jurisdiction. Universal transport zone, more limited. You have to create universal logical switches. There can only be one universal transport zone. You're either in it or you're not. There's not a right or wrong here. It's all about designing it to meet the needs of your business. But I will say it's very normal to see deployments of NSX that simply have one global transport zone with all the clusters that need to participate in logical switching simply added to it. Well, my friend, by going through this nugget together, you have learned what a transport zone is. It's the team. If you're on the team of a transport zone, you get to participate in the VNIs that transport zone supports, the logical switches that are in there, because you'll share the common tables, you'll have access to the switches, you'll be able to forward the messages back and forth, encapsulate and de-encapsulate via VTEP for that particular zone. So hosts in clusters in a transport zone share logical switches. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.